Welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon for Planning for Long-Term Care. My name is Kathy Chern and I am a Consumer Health Librarian at East Brunswick Public Library. Today's program is brought to you by the library's Just for the Health of It initiative to promote community health and wellness. Our speaker today is Bradley Basker, Financial Advisor at Morgan Stanley in Boston. Bradley works with clients to help build a sustainable financial plan to achieve their financial and life goals and manage their assets for them. He is licensed in New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Florida, and Texas. Bradley has already delivered free webinars focused on financial wellness and literacy to companies, synagogues, schools, alumni networks, and public libraries, and enjoys giving back to his communities in this way. Please be aware that this talk is being recorded. Please keep your microphones muted and your webcams off. The recording will be available at ebpl.org/YouTube. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. Our speaker will answer questions at the end of the talk. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to Bradley.
Thanks, Kathy, and good afternoon, everybody. I assume everyone's on the East Coast, but for anyone dialing in from the West Coast or anywhere else, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Bradley Basker. It's great to be back. I think this is my 5th or 6th seminar with the East Brunswick Public Library, and it's always a privilege to be back here. This is part of a 2-part series. Just 3 weeks ago, we did a session on retirement income planning, but today we're here to talk about an often overlooked part of retirement income planning, which is planning for long-term care. And although none of us really likes to think about the possibility that there'll be a time down the road where we will no longer be able to effectively handle the basic activities of daily living, that lack of planning can actually create, financial and emotional strains on you and your family. But planning ahead will give you more choices down the road and help you give that peace of mind. And so that's what we're here to talk about here today. How can you protect yourself against those what-if scenarios down the line? In terms of our agenda, today we're going to cover a number of important topics about long-term care. We'll start with a brief overview of why it's important to talk about long-term care. We'll then spend some time looking at the cost of, as well as your options for paying for long-term care. And then finally, we'll cover some strategies to consider when planning for long-term care. So let's get started. So why is it important to talk about long-term care? Right? No one likes talking about long-term care, which is exactly why you should be talking about it, because there are many reasons we don't like to talk about it, right? All of us have a natural tendency to avoid thinking about depending on others for our care. Additionally, most people don't like to think about getting older or developing a disability or becoming less independent, right? These are things that you never want to think about. It's hard to think about your mortality, etc. But unfortunately, we do have to do it. Talking about long-term care is important because there's a good chance that you will need long-term care services at some point in your life. In fact, 70% of people over age 65 will require some care at some point in their lives, and the likelihood of needing care increases as you age. Talking about long-term care is also important because the cost of long-term care services often exceeds what the average person can pay from income and other resources, particularly in retirement. So consider this. The projected national average cost of 1 year of a private room in a nursing home will be over $230,000 in 2040. So right, that's just 1 year, projected 20 years from now. Point is, it's only getting more expensive. We need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and not depleting everything that we've worked so hard to build up. Now, the high cost of long-term care might also present risks to your financial future, as I said. So things to think about, right? Are you prepared for the consequences of an unexpected health event or outliving your income? What about the consequences of passing away financially unprepared? Right? Are there other risks other than just long-term care expenses to your financial future, right? You might just think about yourself, but what about your spouse, your family, your kids? Who's going to have to take care of you? These are all things to think about, those what ifs and the risks ultimately to your financial future. That's why you're all here today. Now, another thing to consider is that your retirement may be a bit longer than those of previous generations due to longevity currently at peak. We're living longer. As the chart illustrates, a 60-year-old man has a 62% chance of reaching age 85, while a 60-year-old woman has a 71% chance, so it's a little bit higher. Now, if you're a married couple and each of you is 60, there's an 89% chance that at least one of you will live until age 85. And as you get older, your healthcare expenses are likely to increase. As technology and just our healthcare in general gets better and better, people are living longer lives, there's a higher likelihood, there's more years where you could potentially need care because you are living longer and people in general are as well. Now, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, in a study in 2019, a 65-year-old man would need $79,000 in savings to have just a 50% chance of meeting healthcare costs throughout his retirement. And a 65-year-old woman, right, same person, just is a different gender, would need $104,000. Why is that? Because again, on average, women do live a little bit longer. And a 65-year-old couple, add those together, would need $183,000 just to have a 50% chance of meeting their healthcare costs through retirement. We're not even saying 100%. $183,000 in savings just to meet your healthcare costs for a couple at a 50% chance. We obviously like to get that number a little bit higher. So how do you get that number higher? To increase your chances of 90% success of being able to pay, for your ultimately your healthcare costs, a 65-year-old man, woman, and couple would need $144,000, $163,000, $310,000 respectively to have a 90% chance of being able to pay all their healthcare costs, throughout the rest of their life. Now, that doesn't include any long-term care you might require someday through a home care aid, assisted living, or other facility. I'm just talking about straight up healthcare expenses that you might have, right? Hospital bills, etc. Point is, very expensive. It's something that you don't want to think about. But unfortunately, when you look at some of these price tags, it's hard to avoid that conversation. So what is long-term care? You might have heard different definitions of it, but long-term care really refers to personal care or supervision for an extended period of time. And it involves a variety of services designed to meet a person's health or personal care needs. And these services help people live as independently and safely as possible when they can no longer perform everyday activities on their own. So there's kind of what we call 6 everyday activities. That includes being able to go to the bathroom, feeding yourself, getting up from bed, walking, etc. Like those are considered like the everyday activities. And once you can't do at least 2 of those, you're now eligible for long-term care. And while long-term care is often associated with the effects of aging, it might be needed at any time due to an accident or illness. So you might think, oh, long-term care is only for someone who's in their 70s, 80s, or 90s. But long-term care can be relevant for someone in their 50s or 60s, or even someone who's younger. Although I might sort of recommend long-term care is typically best bought, in your 50s and 60s as you're getting closer to that age. Now, some conditions might require long-term care, right? Things like a stroke, cancer, Alzheimer's, or dementia. Those are all candidates for the type of long-term care we're talking about here today. Now, as I mentioned earlier, about 70% of people over the age of 65 will require some care at some point in their lives. And 1 in 7 people over the age of 65 will need long-term care for more than 5 years. Right? Some people are going to need long-term care just for a few months, a few years, but 1 in 7, so 14% or so of people are going to need it for 5 years. If you think about what the cost of that would be for at least 5 years, talking about a lot of money. So let's talk about the cost of long-term care, which I know is on everyone's mind. So the annual costs of long-term care today vary depending on where you live, right? We've got higher cost areas, lower cost areas. So in states like North Carolina and South Dakota, the average annual cost for a private room in a nursing home ranges from $80,000 to $90,000, right? So still expensive. We're still talking about annually having that much money. But get this, you start talking about states like New York and Connecticut, New Jersey, the average annual cost for a private room in a nursing home ranges from $146,000 to $165,000. This is annual cost. Yeah, you might be in a nursing home for multiple years. You start to add that up before you know it, you're in 7 figures. You're talking about millions and millions of dollars. So again, that's something to consider when you think about where do you want to retire, is where is long-term care going to be more affordable. As you can see, the places where cost of living is much higher, long-term care as a result is much more expensive in terms of a nursing home. The places that are cheaper to live, cheaper expenses in terms of the care. So again, it's all about those trade-offs that you have to consider, but keep in mind that the costs do vary depending on where your care is being housed. Now, as I mentioned, long-term care costs have soared in recent years and are expected to continue to rise, right? Again, as people continue to live longer, these insurance companies are saying, well, we need to be compensated for that, right? We don't want to be on the hook for this additional liability. So costs have increased. According to the Genworth Cost of Care Survey in 2019, here's what you can expect to pay for a private room nursing home care, assuming about a 4% annual increase in cost. 4% is higher than inflation, higher than our wages are increasing. So long-term care, we're assuming it's growing at about 4% annualized. That can compound very quickly into a really big number. So keep in mind that the numbers you're seeing here are the costs for just one individual only. For a couple, the cost could be as much as double. So we're seeing, again, what does 1 year look like? 2020, $128,000 on average. In 15 years' time, $200,000. In 30 years' time, we're talking about over $300,000 for just a private room nursing home care on an annualized basis. And that number doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon. Now, as we've seen, long-term care can be expensive, and it's common for people to misunderstand how it is paid for. So let's talk about the different options that are available. I will just sort of add as a caveat, I'm not a Medicare expert. I'm not a Medicaid expert. We have sort of insurance specialists that I work with. If you have questions specifically about any of the stuff on this slide, we can definitely talk about it offline and set up a call with one of our subject matter experts in this space. But a common misperception is that Medicare or Medicaid will pay for all expenses that you have once you start to qualify. But the reality is that Medicare does not pay for assisted living facilities, continuing care retirement, communities, or adult day services. Medicare also does not provide, Medicare does provide limited coverage for nursing home care or home health care, right, up to a certain number of days. So for example, Medicare will pay up to 20 days of nursing home care if you are hospitalized for at least 3 consecutive days before entering the nursing home, right, as long as it's a Medicare-approved skilled nursing facility. So they do cover up to 20 days, but you might be needing nursing home care for much more than 20 days, right? If you continue to need that skilled nursing, as I'm talking about, Medicare might pay for the difference between the total daily cost and a significant copayment, but only up to 100 days. You're really only getting up to a maximum of 100 days of care through Medicare. If you're someone that, again, has Alzheimer's, 100 days isn't going to do much for you. You're going to need it for a lot longer, perhaps for the rest of your life. Now, once you get past that 100 days, the cost of long-term care would be entirely your responsibility to pay out of pocket. If you have Medicare supplement insurance, that may cover a significant copayment from days 21 to 80 of a nursing home stay, but only if your nursing home meets all other Medicare requirements. Again, not an expert in this space, so what those requirements are, I can't speak to in much detail. But the point is there is clearly a limitation even with Medicare supplement insurance. Now, Medicaid coverage for long-term care varies from state to state. However, in most states, you would only qualify for Medicaid if you have less than $2,000 in countable assets. So if you have more than that, you already are not going to be eligible for Medicaid. And so that goes out the window for you in terms of an approach for funding your long-term care needs. And if you look at the last column in this chart, you'll see that the majority of cases you will need to pay for long-term care services on your own. And the truth is you'll need to be able to cover much of the cost yourself in the form of either cash or private insurance. Not everyone's going to have the cash to pay for it. You're all here to talk about, planning for long-term care. And one of those ways you can do that is what's called long-term care insurance. So as I said, one of those possible solutions to paying for long-term care is long-term care insurance. And long-term care insurance protects against the costs associated with disabilities caused by age, injury, or illness. It provides a pool of benefit dollars that can be used for long-term care when and where it's needed, just kind of like any other insurance payout. And these benefit dollars might be used for qualified long-term care costs, including things like home care, assisted living care, nursing home care, or care coordination services. And having long-term care insurance can help mitigate the risk that long-term care expenses could deplete your retirement savings or force you to liquidate assets to pay for your medical expenses, right? You've set yourself up, you've had a financial advisor for all these years, you're ready for retirement, and then retirement comes, you get sick, and all of a sudden you're depleting it, now you're relying on your kids, and everything you've worked for has been totally wiped away because you don't have that protection against potentially health, pitfalls that you might fall into. Now, the cost of long-term care insurance can vary widely, and so I'm not going to give you a number of exactly how much it's going to cost. Depends on your state, how much coverage you want. The cost of a policy is typically a function of the length of coverage and the extent of coverage. And so the features listed on this slide can be modified to fit your needs and budget considerations, and that's something you would want to talk with your financial advisor or the insurance company to kind of figure out what the right mix is for you. So let's talk about each feature in more detail. The first one is the daily benefit amount. This is the maximum benefit you will receive for any one day. And so before choosing a benefit amount, you should try to figure out what the going rate is for nursing home or home health care in your area, right? Because you want to make sure that that daily cost, so to speak, is going to cover or at least cover most of what it's going to cost you on a day-to-day basis for that care. The next thing is what we call the benefit period. You can select a plan that provides benefits for as long as you live or a fixed number of years. The longer the benefit period, the more expensive the policy. So if you're saying I'm 55 and I want a long-term care insurance policy that's going to cover me till I'm 95, well, now there's a higher likelihood of you getting sick. You're going to pay a premium for the fact that you're getting covered pretty much, for the next 40 years. If you say, you know what, I want to get coverage for the next 20 years, but after that, you know what, I'm comfortable knowing I'll have enough in the bank, and if I get sick and I have to pay for it, I'll be okay. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but you have the ability to sort of give a more fixed number of years you want to be covered for, kind of like if you have a term life insurance policy where you say, I want to be covered for this many years. So you can do it for the rest of your life, or you can do it for a fixed number of years. The fewer number of years you do, the cheaper the policy will be in terms of your premiums. The next thing is your elimination period. It's similar to a deductible in a way, but the elimination period should be selected based on the amount of time you're willing to pay for long-term care out of pocket before benefits begin. So common choices for people typically tend to be about 30 days or 90 days, and you may want to avoid policies that require a hospital stay before you can collect benefits. So again, if you're someone that feels like you might be prone to Alzheimer's, you maybe are an early stage or something like that, you don't want to have to be hospitalized in order to qualify. So you want to make sure your policy doesn't sort of have that requirement. And you also want to think about, am I willing to pay out of pocket for more days up to, let's say, that 90-day mark in return for a cheaper premium going forward? If you're someone that perhaps doesn't have the ability to pay even for the first 30 or 15 days, then you want a policy that has a very short elimination period. The second you need long-term care and you qualify, you can start getting those benefits paid out. And then finally, the last one to think about is inflation protection. Many policies now offer inflation protection riders at additional cost that it can increase the monthly benefit that you have each year. Because again, if you've got a benefit payout of $150 a day, but 30 years from now, $150 is not going to be worth what it is today because of inflation, you want to make sure that you can potentially add a rider in that adjusts based on the inflation index, the amount that you get paid out in terms of your benefits. So these are the four considerations. They're extremely flexible. You can, top and tail and pick and choose what works best for you. But those are the four considerations that you want to think about. Now, as you think about all, your retirement and long-term financial future, it's important to consider and manage risk from all angles, right? Because most likely you've already protected yourself against certain risks, like you've protected against your health with health insurance, and you've protected your family and wealth with life and disability insurance. You've also insured probably your car and your home, et cetera. So, why not protect against your long-term care potential health needs? And long-term care insurance gives you that opportunity to protect your retirement lifestyle that you've worked so hard to achieve. And if you were to ever need long-term care, having that long-term care insurance will help give you more choice and more control over where and how you receive those services. All right, if you really want the best care you could possibly get, but that care is going to be expensive, you're going to have to choose between getting the care you want and potentially depleting your retirement savings. With long-term care insurance, that sort of like question of, do I want better care or worse care at a cheaper cost? That kind of question goes out the window. Now, when you look at it this way, long-term care insurance is just an important piece of your retirement and estate planning puzzle. It's not everything, but it should be a factor in everything that you're considering as you plan for that later stage in life. So when you're thinking about annuities and what are you doing with your Roth IRA and your traditional IRA and your 401ks, and you've got a pension, you've got Social Security, right? That long-term care should absolutely have a seat at the table alongside all those other things to make sure you don't just sort of overlook it and say, oh, I'll have enough. Because before you know it, I've seen this with family, right? The cost of long-term care is so expensive and so debilitating for people that it puts families in a really tough place going forward. Okay, so you've now been sold that, you do want to do long-term care insurance, so you're looking to consider it or pursue it. So how do you actually get started? Long-term care planning involves a three-step process. The first step is understanding the need or risk for long-term care. And as lifespans get longer, as I said, the likelihood of needing long-term care at some point in your life will increase. So are you someone that's willing to take on that risk? Are you risk averse? You want to protect yourself against those what if scenarios? Do you feel like you need it? Are you extremely wealthy? You've got multi-millions, you're Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Maybe you don't need long-term care insurance because you have the liquidity. So look at your situation, figure out what your need is, your risk, and also if you're someone that you think might be predisposed to having health issues down the line, you're definitely going to want to think about, perhaps setting that up. Once you've done that, the second step is developing a strategy to offset or manage that risk. Long-term care is not just a personal issue, it's a family issue. So make sure you involve your loved one in that conversation so they know what your wishes and preferences are. And then finally, the third step is actually implementing the strategy, whether it's long-term care insurance planning or solutions for self-funding the cost of long-term care. So again, if you don't want to pay for the insurance, make sure you're planning for your long-term care with your self-funding approaches, right? Saving that up in a separate account that's managed with the intent of being there when you need it for long-term care. The one thing I just want to say very quickly is with long-term care insurance, by the time you need it, it's too late. You're going to be uninsurable. So if you've got a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, or you've got, some debilitating condition, or you need, help with those 2 daily activities I was talking about, it's going to be too late. It's the same thing with life insurance, right? If you realize you've got, a terminal illness, an underwriter is not going to give you life insurance because there's obviously a high likelihood that you pass away. So the whole point is, if you want to get long-term care insurance, the time to do it is when you actually don't yet need it. And that time for most people tends to be in their 50s and 60s. That's sort of the right time to potentially go about that approach. Now, as you start to think about long-term care, here's some very important questions for you to ask. Number one, where are long-term care services provided? Right? As I mentioned earlier, most people prefer to receive care in their home. But what if you require services beyond what can be provided in your own home? Right? Make sure you understand the differences between skilled nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, and retirement communities. Next question is, what effect could long-term care have on your family and retirement strategy? Right? If you're someone that perhaps wants to preserve your wealth and you want to make sure you leave it for your spouse or your heirs, your kids, your grandkids, right? Long-term care insurance might help preserve that wealth that you've built up. Right? What would it cost? What are your options if you need to pay for long-term care? Are you going to self-fund it? Are you going to use that benefit from the long-term care insurance payout? Right? Those are only decisions that you can make based on your goals, your personal financial situation. But these are the questions you should really be thinking about. As a financial advisor, I'd be happy to talk through some of these questions with you and help you understand some of those answers to the questions and think about, what that estate planning and retirement analysis would look like. Now, some other things to think about, this is almost like an FAQ, so to speak. So if you've made the decision to get long-term care insurance, here's some questions you also should be thinking about when actually shopping for a policy. The first one is, how much protection or daily benefit does the policy provide? That daily benefit is the dollar amount that the long-term care policy per day will give you based on the type of care, so nursing home or home care, and you must pay any charges above that daily benefit amount. So if the benefit amount is $150 a day and it's costing you $200, you're going to have to pay that $50 difference. So be sure to understand how much you're going to be required to pay if you need long-term care, and higher benefit amounts usually correspond to higher premiums. So you should consider your budget and savings. So if you want a higher daily benefit amount because you're in a higher cost area, keep in mind that's going to cost you more in terms of your premiums to pay into that. The next thing is, does the policy contain inflation protection? I talked about that earlier. The premium will usually be higher for a policy that protects you against inflation and adjusts those payouts as inflation increases. How soon do the benefits begin after admission to a nursing home? Right? Generally, policies with longer waiting periods cost less. Again, risk-reward, cost-benefit trade-off. Do you want those benefits to start right away? Great. You're going to pay a little bit more in terms of your premiums leading up to that. If you're someone that is willing to wait, pay 30 days out of pocket, 60 days out of pocket, you can get cheaper policies that way. Next question, how many years of institutionalization are included? So how many years can you kind of be in that nursing home or in a home care situation? Most policies provide at least 1 year, and some policies provide as many as 4 or 5 years. And some states exempt institutionalized persons from the Medicaid asset limitations if they have long-term care insurance, providing a minimum level of coverage. Next question is custodial care, which is sort of that assistance with the basic daily activities that I talked about, either in your own home or in a nursing home. Is that custodial care covered? You should know custodial care is not covered by Medicare. That's why you might want to get long-term care insurance if you're someone that perhaps, again, wouldn't be able to feed themselves and go to the bathroom, right? You've now qualified for that custodial care. Medicare would not cover that. Long-term care insurance would. Next question you want to think about is home care covered? Many elderly are cared for at home prior to entering a nursing home. So policies with home care are typically more expensive, right? You're now kind of covering more potential scenarios. If you want that home care, you want to be able to be treated in your home, that might be a little bit more of an expensive policy. Another question to think about is, does the policy have restrictive provisions on pre-existing conditions or exclusions from coverage, right? Especially things like Alzheimer's or other mental disorders. That's the question to ask. Generally, you want a policy with as few restrictions as possible. And in its model long-term care policy, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners recommends coverage for Alzheimer's disease if the policyholder develops it after purchasing the policy. So after you have the policy, you want to make sure you also get Alzheimer's coverage if you start to develop it before, again, the insurance underwriter says, you know, you're so far down the road, we're not going to administer the plan for you. The question to ask as well, is the right to renew the policy for life guaranteed, right? So if there's a certain amount of years that you'll be covered for, let's say you get past that, you're like, I want to continue to renew it. You want to ask, is this guaranteed? Will I have the right to renew? If not, maybe you want to find someone that will absolutely guarantee the right to renew that policy. If they won't, then you want to consider either doing a lifelong policy, which will in theory be more expensive, or you want to find a different provider. Next question, and this is something that a lot of people don't really think about, is how financially sound is the company that's actually offering the policy? So when it's Mass Mutual or Protective or what's another one, Symetra, et cetera, these different life insurance companies, you want to ask how financially sound is the company offering the policy? So why is that? Because given the fact that these policies might not be used for many years, you want to check insurance company ratings to help determine the long-term viability of the company. If they go belly up, you're going to have to sort of figure out how to get that money back. I don't know the exact process because a lot of the companies we work with are financially sound A+ rated. But you want to make sure that you don't sort of find yourself in a situation where you get a note 20 years from now and they're, oh, sorry, we're going belly up, and all the premiums you've paid in are forgone. So you want to make sure you find a company that seems like they've got a good track record and they've got a good financial stability. Now, this is a lot to think about, and I'm sure this is a lot to take in at once, and you're probably like, wow, I don't even know where to start. And so I'm happy to talk to any of you you'd like to about your long-term care insurance needs, how to get sort of shopping around for different policies and getting different quotes. That's all stuff I'm happy to help with for anyone that is interested. Now, I'd like to leave you with one final thought before we kind of move towards the Q&A, and that is life is complicated and can be a balancing act of planning, you know, for many different goals along the way. You know, you've got things like buying your first home, sending your kids to school, setting yourself up for retirement, buying that second vacation home. How long do you want to retire for? Where do you want to live, right? What kind of legacy do I want to live in terms of charitable giving, leaving some money for my heirs, etc. There's a lot going on. And so taking the time to make a plan for your long-term care needs can help you stay in control of your choices later on in life. Like I said, as a financial advisor, you know, I help assess every aspect of someone's financial life, from savings to investments to insurance to taxes to retirement, estate planning, etc. And I'm happy to kind of help make recommendations based on your individual needs and really from a long-term care perspective to protect your financial future. So I want to thank everyone for your time and attention here today. I know it's been, you know, a lot of content covered in a very short amount of time. For anyone that would like to reach out to me directly, I know Kathy will follow up with my contact information after the session. So feel free to set up time or call me or email me. You know, as I mentioned, I love doing these types of consultations. I don't charge for them. I'm happy to just answer any questions you have, especially as a community member of the East Brunswick Public Library. But again, take down my information. Kathy will follow up with it. And at this point, I'd love to stop, turn the floor back over to Kathy to help administer a little bit of a Q&A.
Right, so thank you, Bradley, for taking the time to present on this topic and answering our questions and for doing this financial wellness series with us. So next month, we will be starting a two-part series focusing on women and wealth. So the first webinar is called Women and Wealth, How to Consider What Matters Most for Creating a Financial Plan. And that will take place on Friday, May 14th at 12 p.m. The second webinar in the series will be Career Comebacks, Making the Most of Your Re-Entry to the Workforce, taking place on Friday, May 21st at 12 p.m. For more information or to register, you could check the library's events page at ebpl.org/calendar. So thank you everyone for joining us for today's talk, and take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining.